Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today we're looking at the 2026 U.S. Senate elections and specifically focusing on the state of Alaska, where there is a very competitive Senate race underway that I wanted to give a dedicated video to because I think is a very interesting race. So the current Senate map right now for 2026 is Democrats currently hold 47 Senate seats, Republicans currently hold 53. Now, the way the map is constructed and the senators that are in each respective state, this is a map that overall is pretty strong for the Republicans. Most of the Republican Senate seats that are up in 2026 are all in pretty solidly red states, like Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi. These are all places that voted for Donald Trump in 2024 by many of them well over 15% to be considered a safe seat. There are also a few Democratic senators up in places that Donald Trump either won or was very competitive in 2024, like in Georgia, Michigan, and New Hampshire. On the Democratic side, however, though, there are a lot of Republican senators that are up that could be in competitive places. The two most amongst them are North Carolina and Maine. North Carolina being a very close swing state every single presidential election cycle year, and Maine is typically a likely Democratic state with the Republican Susan Collins. But for this map, Democrats, given the election environment for 2026, which we can look here at the most recent approval ratings, Democrats are currently leading by roughly 4.2% on the generic ballot, and Democrats are anticipating having a very strong 2026 midterm election. So instead of just going after North Carolina or Maine, which are the early targets for the Democrats are trying to expand the map and go after states that are typically more solid Republican states or likely Republican states, but have recruited strong Democratic candidates. The last video I did focused on the state of Ohio, where former Senator Sherrod Brown is running, who is a very uniquely strong Democratic candidate. Alaska has a similar situation as well. This is a state that's typically a likely Republican state, but the Democratic U.S. representative from 2022 through 2024, MARY PELTOLA, is the Democratic candidate. So for this video, I started out by putting the Senate map right now at every state that I have as safe and likely for their respective parties. I've assigned to their respective categories. So everything that's lean and under, meaning everything that I think is 5% or under right now, I have in the toss-up category. This puts the Republicans at about 47 Senate seats, Democrats at 44. Now, Alaska in its Senate race is going to play a very important role in the 2026 Senate elections, and I kid you not, may very well decide whether the Democrats or the Republicans hold a majority in the U.S. Senate. So let's talk about this Senate race in Alaska. First things first, it's important to mention that this Senate race is for the Senate seat held by Republican incumbent Dan Sullivan. Dan Sullivan won for the first time, I believe, in 2014 in the Republican midterm wave year and won re-election in 2020, getting 53.99% of the vote. He won against Democrat Al Gross, who got 41.26%, and I believe this is third-party candidate John Howe. I believe it's John Howe. So it was a very reliable red win in 2020 for Dan Sullivan. Now, as for the state of Alaska, we can look in 2024. Donald Trump won the state against Kamala Harris, getting 54.54% of the vote. Kamala Harris, 41.41%. Overall, a likely Republican win, and one the Republicans won by quite a lot. Though I've seen this comment been made multiple times on past videos and live streams, Alaska, in terms of population, is a relatively small state, while only having about 338,000 voters from 2024. So even though Donald Trump won by roughly about 13 percentage points in overall votes, Trump only won by roughly about 44,000 votes or so. And when you're talking about scale, trying to get 44,000 votes to the other side is technically on paper easier than when you talk about trying to flip a state like Pennsylvania or Michigan that has a lot more votes. You have to try and flip, say, 200,000 voters. The raw numbers are a lot easier in a place like Alaska, but the DNA of the state is more Republican, which makes it more challenging than a swing state. However, Alaska, the Democrats have a very uniquely qualified candidate for this race, and that is Democratic Representative Mary Peltola, who Peltola won for the first time in 2022. She narrowly lost re-election in 2024 on the same ballot where Donald Trump won the state by 13 points. On the initial voting, Nick Begich, the Republican challenger, got 48.52%. Peltola got 46.48%. In Alaska, in the House race, it utilizes ranked choice voting, which means the winning candidate must break 50% of the vote. Alaska's election system is the top four candidates from the primary advance to the general. If no candidate breaks 50%, then ranked choice voting commences, and then it will keep going until there's two candidates left and one of them breaks 50% if the candidate before does not break 50. So in the initial round, Begich got 48.52, Peltola 46.48. In terms of overall votes, very, very close. Begich got 159,550, Peltola 152,828. Only a difference on the first ballot of roughly about 7,000 votes. Once the ranked choice voting process commenced, Begich ended up winning 51.2% to Peltola's 48.8%. Overall, 164,000 votes to about 156,000. So again, only a difference of roughly 8,000 votes across his entire district. Now, this is where it gives the Democrats optimism here. Peltola lost re-election in Alaska in 2024 on the same ballot that Donald Trump won this state by roughly about 13 points. Now, I want to show you the House race overall for the forecast for this Undecision Desk HQ. They had overall this race as a toss-up. The Cook Political Voting Index, or the PVI of the state, is Republican +8. And Begich was nearly favored over Peltola to win, 62 to 38% in terms of chance to win here, but the forecast was very close at Republican +2. So why am I bringing this up? Well, this was in 2024 in an election that Donald Trump and the Republicans did very well across the country. 2026 is going to be an election more similar to 2018, where the Democrats did very well across the country. So Peltola, despite the fact that she's running for Senate in a state that's typically a very red state, voted for Donald Trump 54.54%. She's a candidate, as a Democratic candidate, that is uniquely qualified and very popular in the state of Alaska that can make this race competitive. Now, I do just want to show you the maps real quick, because this is what it looked like on a county-by-county basis of Alaska in 2024. This is the Trump versus Kamala Harris race. Here's what it looked like in 2020. A lot more blue throughout the state, but some close counties that Trump won, like North Slope, Alaska. Anchorage, one of the larger cities in the state of Alaska by population, nearly voted for Joe Biden as well. I want to show you the House map of Begich versus Peltola, which again ended up being a little bit under a 3-point victory for Begich over Peltola. Look at the amount of blue on the map. Blue pretty much everywhere, including in Anchorage, except for these smaller by population counties that were red as well. This is what a competitive map would look like in the state of Alaska. I'm not going to get too much into the nitty gritty on the counties and stuff. That'll probably be for a later day for like an election night type video. But look at the amount of blue Peltola was able to get in Alaska in this House map. That's going to be very important, because even if we see Dan Sullivan win against MARY PELTOLA, given the circumstances of this race, the quality of candidate that Peltola is, and given the election environment of 2026, a map like this is a lot more realistic for 2026 in all likelihood than the 2024 Alaska map and even the 2020 Alaska map as well. So I wanted to point that out before getting into the Senate race specifically for 2026. So now that we do that, we can look into the 2026 map overall in the state and see what's going on. The 2026 Senate election, we know, is going to be U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan. He's declared to run for re-election in this race. He has the endorsement of President Trump and several Republicans already, and he'll be facing off against MARY PELTOLA. There is a Green Party candidate running as well, Richard Grayson, and an independent candidate, Sid Hill, has filed paperwork as well. Depending on how many other candidates are in the race, that will probably be the general election matchup after the primary election, where the top four will advance. As for this race, MARY PELTOLA already has the endorsement of Pete Buttigieg and Elisa Slotkin, including state legislator Tom Begich, who is running for governor on the same ticket as Peltola in 2026. On the Republican side, Dan Sullivan has the endorsement of Donald Trump, executive branch official Tara Sweeney, U.S. fellow Senator Lisa Murkowski, U.S. Representative Nick Begich, who just defeated Peltola. He has the endorsement of all of them. In terms of money in this race, money on this channel, I don't talk about it too much in regards to this race, but I wanted to point this out because look at how close it is. Dan Sullivan's raised about $9.1 million. Mary Peltola has raised about $8.7 million nearly. So when it comes to money, it's only a difference of roughly about $400,000 to $500,000. It's very, very close. In cash on hand, Sullivan has about $7 million. Peltola has about $5.7 million. So again, as the challenger and the incumbent, pretty evenly matched, when incumbents typically have a much larger advantage than the challengers. Very evenly matched matchup on this one. Alaska Survey Research poll from March shows what the multi-race candidates matchup looks like, but we're going to pretty much ignore this one and focus on the head-to-head matchups for Peltola versus Dan Sullivan, because this is where things get really interesting. 3 out of the 4 political prediction websites Inside Elections, Cook Political Report, and Sabler Crystal Ball have this race listed as lean Republican in the advantage of Dan Sullivan. Race to the White House has it listed as a toss-up. Now, there's only been really 2 pollsters in this race thus far, Alaska Survey Research and Public Policy Polling, who Public Policy Polling is a Democratic-affiliated polling firm that does a lot of work on behalf of potential Democratic candidates. So those numbers may skew a little bit in the direction of Peltola to seem her be stronger and Sullivan be weaker. Alaska Survey Research, though, does not have a Democrat or Republican affiliation and can be looked at as sort of an unbiased poll on face value. Now, what they show in the polling averages thus far is Mary Peltola is actually leading Dan Sullivan. Race to the White House average has Peltola at 48.1, Dan Sullivan 44.7, with a roughly 7.2% of voters either voting third party or considered undecided at this current point in time. The most recent poll we have came out just last week from Alaska Survey Research, where it showed that Peltola had 49%, Dan Sullivan 43%, and 8% for other. James Ryan, a Republican undeclared, with 5%, and Sid Hill, the independent, with about 3%. Now, it also showed the poll with just James Ryan in it. It had Peltola at 50, Dan Sullivan at 44, and James Ryan at roughly about 6. So this is very interesting because Peltola as the challenger, Sullivan is the incumbent, but this poll shows clearly Mary Peltola is leading Dan Sullivan by roughly about 5 to 6 points, depending on the poll. The prior poll from March shows very similar results at 49 to 44, 50 to 44, and the head-to-head matchup of ranked choice voting, what it could end up looking like. Peltola is ahead 52 to 48. The Democratic public policy polling from back in January showed a 2-point race, 49-47, with 4% undecided. Look, obviously, we're in April, we're at the end of April, and it's going to be interesting to see how this race ultimately plays out. But one thing is very clear right now, this is not the Senate race from 2020 that Dan Sullivan won by 13 points. This race right now is looking more similar to the Begich versus Peltola race, which ended up being a very narrow result, than it is looking like to be a Republican blowout where things don't really seem too scary. The Democrats have a very real chance at winning the Senate race, and Mary Peltola is honestly the best candidate Democrats could put up in this race, and the early polling numbers are showing that. Ultimately, how does it all break out? It's really, really close and hard to say at this current point in time. I do want to show you the Senate, or the U.S. Senate site for Decision Desk HQ, and I want to show you the market odds here, because this race is now actually flipped according to the Kalshi odds for how they think it's going to go. Dan Sullivan's been leading this race for a while, and then right around the beginning of March, we saw it actually flip, going from 54-46 for Sullivan over Peltola to now, as of today, Peltola is leading 60-40, roughly a 60-40 chance to win this race. So as more polls have come out in this race, it's clear Peltola is leading and the momentum is on her side. Now, what does this all mean? Because we can look, I believe it is the 2024 map for Alaska in 2024, and see what the polling looked like on this one for the general election. Alaska Survey Research's final poll for Trump versus Harris had Trump winning by about 10 points over Kamala Harris. It did actually accurately predict Trump getting 54.54%, so it kind of nailed the Trump support, but it did overinflate Kamala Harris's support by about 4%. Could something similar happen in the Senate race, where right now Mary Peltola's support is being overinflated and Dan Sullivan's at 44.7% is likely definitely not being overinflated? It's possible, and it's possible once everything is said and done, Dan Sullivan ends up winning this race. But at this current point in time, there's a lot of undecided vote that's left out there, but Mary Peltola is the candidate that's closer to 50% of the vote. So unless Alaska Survey Research polling is missing by a lot and is off by 3 or 4 points, this should be a wake-up call to Republicans that Peltola at this current moment in time seems to be narrowly ahead in a state that's typically a pretty reliable Republican win. So what does this all ultimately mean for 2026? Does this mean Mary Peltola is guaranteed to win this race? No, I don't think she's guaranteed to win it. Does it mean Dan Sullivan's guaranteed to win this race? Honestly, no, I don't think so either. I think this race right now is in the true definition of a toss-up, a race that is in a likely Republican state at the presidential level at this current point in time. To me, looking at this map right now, looks like the most competitive toss-up state on the map. Just to give you a quick thoughts on how the map's looking right now, I would put Iowa and Texas and lean Republican at this current point in time. Ohio, Sherrod Brown versus Jon Husted. It's going to be competitive, but I think Republicans are favored to win there as well. That gets the Republicans to 50 Senate seats. The Democrats, I would say right now, Jon Ossoff is favored to win re-election in Georgia. Chris Pappas is favored to hold the New Hampshire Senate race versus John Sununu right now in New Hampshire. And then North Carolina, Roy Cooper has had a steady lead, similar to Peltola over Michael Whatley, and so Peltola over Dan Sullivan in this race. I think North Carolina is a slight favorite for the Democrats right now. Maine, Susan Collins versus Graham Plattner seems to be the likely matchup. The early polling data has shown Plattner leading over Collins right now as well. I'd give the advantage to the Democrats on that. Michigan, its U.S. Senate primary has to shake out. Ultimately, we'll have to wait and see how that all goes. But Michigan, in a more blue election environment without Donald Trump at the top of the ticket, Democrats, I would say, start out as the favorites there. It puts the Senate at 49 for the Democrats, 50 for the Republicans. Now, the Republicans, due to them having Vice President J.D. Vance, are going to hold the Senate based on this current map. But whether or not they do it by a tiebreaker or by the Senate seat could make a very big difference here. In Alaska, if Mary Peltola pulls off the upset, it's a 50 Senate, and every single vote J.D. Vance would have to break the tie to pass any bill the Republicans are in favor of that the Democrats are opposed to. And if even one Republican senator, like fellow Alaskan Lisa Murkowski, says she doesn't want to support the bill, that's it. The bill is done unless they can get a Democrat to vote for the bill. So Peltola winning here would play a very important say in this. If the Republican Dan Sullivan can hold on and win Alaska, it would be a very important win for the Republicans, as it gives the Republicans essentially a one Senate seat buffer in trying to pass things. Where if Murkowski does ultimately vote no, the Republicans can still afford to pass bills if J.D. Vance can break the tiebreaker if all other Republican senators go along with it. So Alaska being so incredibly close, with Peltola leading in the polls right now, in a state that typically votes red, in an election environment that is supposed to be good for the Democrats, it's shaping up to be, in my opinion, the closest battleground state right now on the 2026 Senate map. A few months ago, I would have said that would have been North Carolina or Maine or potentially Michigan. Even further back, I would have said Georgia. But right now, Alaska is shaping up to be the closest Senate race in the map for me right now, and I can't wait to watch this race unfold, because this is really going to come down to the wire, and I can't wait to see how it ultimately all goes. For now, I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a comment down below. Who do you think is going to win this race? Do you think Mary Peltola could win it? Do you think Dan Sullivan could win it? Leave all your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you in a future video.